on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
I personally think the outdoors are a remedy for everything. Whatever your race, gender, these activities are for everybody. This is not an exclusive club.
A lot of the problems that we look at in the world can be reduced down to humans forgetting that they're animals. I find hunting is so humbling in that it's a reminder that you're a participant in an ecosystem, not just a visitor to it.
The money that's coming in from hunting and fishing is how we manage bald eagles. It's how we manage piping plovers. It's how we manage New England cottontails, not just for the game species, but for most all the non-game species.
There's this sort of stereotype out there that the hunter doesn't care about anything but what they take. And I've found that to not be true.
Embrace people for whatever they want to participate, however they want to hunt, and support that. It's all awesome way to participate in the outside, and we should be embracing and supporting each other and lifting each other up.
Episode 57 of the WildFed podcast, A Remedy for Everything. Getting People Outside with Judy Camuso is brought to you by Surthrival. Surthrival produces one of the most scientifically validated CBD supplements on the market. It's called CBD3 because it contains two of the most rigorously studied nutraceutical CBD extracts plus an organic full-spectrum hemp extract, all in one organic hemp carrier oil. And right now at surthrival.com, if you buy one, the second bottle is 40% off. If you're looking for the real medicinal benefits of CBD, head over to surthrival.com. This episode is also brought to you by Earth Runners. Earth Runners is a line of adventure sandals with Vibram soles and an innovative grounding system, which uses electrically conductive laces and a copper plug in the sole to connect a circuit between you and the ground, just like when you're barefoot. There's some interesting science looking at the effects of being electrically grounded on your health. Here's a few lines from an abstract of a 2015 paper titled The Effects of Grounding, Earthing, on Inflammation, the Immune System, Wound Healing, and Prevention and Treatment of Chronic Inflammatory and Autoimmune Diseases. Quote, multidisciplinary research has revealed that electrically conductive contact of the human body with the surface of the earth, grounding or earthing, produces intriguing effects on physiology and health. Such effects relate to inflammation, immune response, wound healing, and prevention and treatment of chronic inflammatory and autoimmune diseases, close quote. Earth Runners reminds you that most shoes are insulators, disconnecting you from the ground. Get grounded. You can learn more at earthrunners.com, where the coupon code WildFed always gets you 10% off your order. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. If you're a regular listener to the show, you've no doubt heard me talk passionately about hunting, fishing, and foraging in Maine. Living here is as much a lifestyle as it is an address. While nowhere near as remote or wild as Alaska, geography has us on the outer fringes of the country just the way we like it. The southern part of the state, while still quaint to my friends who visit from LA or New York, has all that Anywhere USA big box store feel and ever-increasing gentrification and development. But as you push north, all that quickly evaporates into endless tracts of thick forest. Towns gradually stop having names and start being designated by alphanumeric codes. It's a place of moose and black bears, wild brook trout, and bald eagles soaring over gently sloping, glacially scoured mountains. If you hunt or fish in the inland waters of Maine, you do so under the authority of the Department of Inland Fish and Wildlife. And heading the department up is Judy Camuso. And she's got a refreshing new take on the job. In fact, she's realigning the way the department communicates with its stakeholders. Under her watch, the department developed a new and more relevant voice with marketing, email campaigns, social media, and podcasts. Without these tools, younger generations might never find their way to hunting and therefore conservation, participating in ways that fund research and keep animals on our landscape. I'm particularly impressed with her forward-thinking approach, and as an adult-onset hunter herself, she's uniquely qualified to understand the barriers to entry that new participants experience. That means more communication, educational and mentorship programs, and fresh approaches designed to get new folks out into the field. As someone with one foot placed somewhat firmly in the digital space, it's exciting to see, and sitting down with her to talk about her vision was a pleasure. She even tolerated a light barrage of policy questions I've been building up over the years. So Judy, you're a good sport. So enjoy this conversation with Judy Camuso. She provides a lot of insight into what's needed for a bright future for hunting and fishing especially here in the great state of Maine.
Judy Camuso, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So you are the commissioner of Maine's inland fish and wildlife.
I am. Woohoo.
We've made it to Grant, we made it to the top of the pyramid. All right, let's get started why we're really here. When are we going to get to hunt mourning doves?
I thought you were going to say Sundays. I was like, oh boy.
Ooh, yeah, there's so much I want to talk about today. But first I'd like to learn a little bit about you. I know a little bit about you from online and being here in your home, and thanks for having us. I'm guessing your background is ornithology.
Yeah, mostly it's non-game birds for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your background. So you're a biologist by
Yep, I'm a
training.
wildlife biologist. I worked the first half of my career at Maine Audubon, right down here in Falmouth. And yeah, my passion are really birds, or one of my passions are birds. And so I worked at Audubon for about 11 years, and I did a lot of outdoor education. And my personal why, why I do this is I believe that the more people you can connect nature into the outdoors, the more people you can instill a passion in for outdoor activities and fisheries and wildlife, the more people who are going to care, the better conservation is going to be. So my personal goal has always been to try and connect people with outdoors. And that's mostly what I did at Audubon. I did a whole bunch of different outdoor education type, birding classes, plant ID classes, everything from wildflowers to tree ID to, reading the landscape, all those kind of things. I coordinate all of those for Maine Audubon. I did a few different research projects on birds while I was there. And then after about 11 years, I just felt like I was ready for a little more growth, and a position opened up with the state. It's probably the only job I would have applied for because, I loved it at Audubon, but I was ready for a little bit of a change. And so I applied for the position of a regional biologist in Gray, and I, by some miracle, got that job.
Now, transitioning from Audubon,
I know,
this
right?
is just how I view it, and I don't understand all of the ins and outs of it, of course.
Sure.
So, but I'm guessing Audubon to the department is a pretty big change, particularly from bird watching to take must be.
Yeah.
So how is that for you personally, and then how was it for your colleagues
Yeah.
and whatnot as well?
Yeah, so it was a change in a lot of ways, and not in just the ways you would think. So I went from an agency or an organization that was mostly women, mostly female, and non-consumptive use, and kind of grant and donation-based organization to an organization that was much broader in its scope, and dealt with game and non-game, but didn't have the donation grant aspect to it. So the financial, the financial mechanisms were a little bit different. So, and to an agency that was literally, virtually in the area I worked in, all men. So when I started, there wasn't even, there wasn't a single woman in the office that I worked in. It was just me.
Okay.
And so that was a culture change for me. I grew up in a family I've got 4 older brothers, so I'm pretty comfortable with men, but it's still to only be around men. It was it was a little bit of a shock.
I want to dig into that here in a second, but before we get there, because I feel like that's a significant part of this story, because you now have a pretty awesome team of women around you, right? I've got to work with some of these women, and they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm going to dance around this a little bit because the politics are so tense and all right now, but I'm just guessing, if I was going to paint really, really broad brushstrokes, not only is the funding mechanism different, but the people from whom the money is coming are so different, right? When I picture who donates to Audubon, they're probably 180 degrees sort of sociopolitically from the people whose money goes into inland fish and wildlife. If I was going to, again, I know that's broad.
If you were going to sort of stereotype, they'd be more overlap than you think.
Okay.
Yeah, the folks, the department is funded primarily through the sale of hunting and fishing licenses, as well as a tax on the equipment that people use to participate in those activities. And Audubon is funded mostly entirely through donations, grants, and minor fees for programs.
Is it better funded because of that?
So that's the big difference, actually. And so at Audubon, it was really the funding was so tight.
Okay. So
that
you guys
it
are
was
on the
really
treadmill always
competitive.
trying to get the cash to come
Constantly
in.
on a treadmill, and constantly you couldn't work on a project that you didn't have funding for. And so because of the grant requirements and a whole host of other things.
Okay.
And so now I went and worked for an agency that has pretty solid funding and a very stable source of funding. So
from the product, which is essentially the sale of licenses and then the sale of equipment that gets federal funds that make their way back to the state.
Right. And so now I went to an agency where, if I needed help, there was an army of people willing to help. There was never a question of who am I going to charge this to? I mean, it's just like, you need help? Sure. No, we can come help. How many people do you need? What do you need for equipment? Do you need trucks? Do you need ATVs? Do you need canoe? Like, it was just it was a cultural change to be working with, all men who mostly come from a consumptive use background, but a lot of people were pretty still interested in birds and in my interest, but also, for a different approach to how you went about your day-to-day activities, and that if people needed help with the project, there was a never-ending supply of people willing to help.
Yeah, so you got the labor, you got the ATVs, you got the trucks, you got all that stuff. Yeah, you got
the equipment, and you've got people.
That's cool. I had something I hadn't thought about.
And truly, the folks that work in the agency, the game wardens and the biologists are so interested in the subject matter that they're so excited to be able to help with anything like, any sort of biological goose banding or duck banding, anything like that. Everybody's eager to help participate in those projects. So
that's interesting, because there's this sort of stereotype out there, and that the hunter doesn't care about anything but what they take. And I found that to not be true.
That's not true at all.
But it is a pervasive stereotype. And I would imagine... So I would have almost imagined you saying something different than that.
Right.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's not, and that would have been probably, 15 years ago. That might have been my perception as well. But that's, in my experience, hunters are in general interested in almost everything in the outdoors, and the actual take of the animal is the smallest little fraction of why they do it. It's the whole outdoor experience. It's the camaraderie. It's the, connection with the animal that they're trying to pursue. It's the connection with the landscape. Most people go out either with a friend or family. It's that so there's so many layers to it that are the actual take of something is almost it's obviously the kind of the goal, but it's minor, I think, compared to the other.
It's interesting because when you have a goal, you'll do so much work to get there.
Yeah.
And I see, let's say that we were talking about straight up birding.
Yeah.
Even there, having that list of things you're trying to check off, you need to have something you're trying to do, right?
Right. So I used to keep, and I still do, a year list of birds, a list of birds that I see every year. And the whole purpose of that was to remind me, you haven't seen, yellow-billed cuckoo, you should go to Brownfield Bog and try and find that bird,
yeah,
right? So that's the goal, and it sort of what sets up the motion and gets you out doing different things. It's the two, the birders and the hunters are very similar. They just have they just maybe have a different kind of outcome, but they're passionate about what they do. They're familiar with the habitats needed, the time of year, the seasonality, the day, there's the time of day. They do very much the same thing.
Yeah. I feel like there's been, now I'm coming into hunting and fishing later in life, so my perspective is admittedly very limited.
Yep.
And, you've been my commissioner, you know what I mean? So I don't have this, a lifetime of perspective with eyes on this, but maybe that gives me some fresh eyes too. It occurs to me looking at the world right now that, and this is, I'm saying this in part because I see this happening under your watch. It seems like a lot of groups that thought they were at odds with each other are actually have more, not only more in common, but are going to have to band together to maintain open places and wildlife on the landscape in a way that maybe they didn't have to before, because by default there was so much of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I'm curious if you can say you see partnerships there maybe where people didn't see them in the past.
For sure. Yeah. And I think, there's still limited conservation dollars, right? So we have to partner. We have to work together with people to accomplish our goals. And we have to work with our partners and kind of take advantage of their expertise. And I think in particular right now, we're in this really unusual time with COVID in that people are participating in the outdoor activities in just unprecedented numbers. Every place you go, trailheads are absolutely jam-packed. Hunting numbers are up, angling numbers are up, boat registrations, turkey permits, everything up, up, up. But we, as people in the conservation community, need to make sure that those people that are new feel welcome, they feel supported, they feel safe, and that they get the support and the help they need so that they continue to do it, right, beyond this pandemic. Right now, people are outside because it's the safe place to be. And it's an area where people can go. And I think personally, people can go and they can go outside and be like, life is normal out here, right? It's not so scary. It's safe. And so our job as conservationists, whether you work at Audubon, the Nature Conservancy, Maine Fish and Wildlife, Trout Unlimited, Pheasant, wherever, our job is to make sure that all those people stay going outside and they stay participating in the activities that many people are now just kind of dipping their toe into. And I would be so happy if one of the, results of this global crisis is that more people put their phones away a little more often and spend more time connecting with nature and less time connecting online.
We had connected with the department via R3, so we connected with Katie and Brittany and got brought in a little bit to some of the conversations that were happening. And when that was pre-COVID, and we saw how much energy was being put into how do we get people in the outdoors. Then all this happens, and whether all that almost didn't matter any of that stuff because suddenly people are just out there. So you guys must have a glimpse then into what's possible. Right. So now it's how do we keep this? Because
going?
It's not just about selling hunting licenses; it's about funding the field work as well, right? The biologists and all of that.
I mean, and it there's this multiple kind of layers there because one, our staff by and large, we get criticized for this all the time. Our staff are relatively immune. So the biologists that are making recommendations for the various permits, they're relatively immune to the money aspect of it. So they're just making their recommendations totally based on biological
You're talking
data.
about for bag limits,
for bag limits,
take,
season dates,
that.
all that kind of stuff. So they don't really think about the money end of it at all. I, of course, have to think about it. So there's multiple things that come along with the purchase of a license. And one is, that it funds the agency, right? Also how we do wildlife management in this state. So it is how we keep our wildlife populations at socially acceptable levels. And so when we can talk about turkeys are a good example where I think for a little while there, we probably tipped the social tolerance for turkeys. And we had a lot of people who were not as happy. They wanted to see fewer turkeys. And so our job...
I'm trying to get my head around what scenario I would want to see less turkeys, but I do.
Well, there's lots of people who, when I had one day when I went to 3 different places and people that didn't know who I were, heard them, kind of grousing about the turkeys are in my blueberry bush.
Right.
So that's when, hunters actually, they're like a supply of volunteers that are doing wildlife management for us on the ground. So there's that level.
I've been doing my part.
Yeah. And then there's the whole, for me personally, wanting to get those people connected and so that they participate year after year so that when there's a funding issue, when there's a land bond, when there is something that we need politically their support and their help with, they understand hey, this is important to me. I care about wildlife populations in the state. I'm going to help here, whatever the situation may be. So there's a lot of reasons why having more people participate in the activities that we manage is beneficial to not just the people in my agency and the wildlife populations, but to the whole state. I mean, it's a huge economic driver in the state of Maine.
When you switched over to the department, did you have aspirations of this job that you're in now, and how do you get there? Are you appointed? Were you appointed to this position?
Yes. So I was appointed by Governor Mills and then confirmed by the legislature. And I ran into a woman that gave me my first job in biology when I was 26, maybe. I ran into her as I was the plover intern, and she reminded me
what intern?
piping plover.
Okay,
piping
yeah. I
plover
lifeguarded in Wells and Ogunquit.
Yeah,
so
and she
familiar with
reminded
these
me
birds.
that back then I told her that I was going to be commissioner.
Really? Okay.
I was like, what an arrogant little kid I was. Oh my God. Because I really didn't have any idea what that meant, but I knew that was like where I wanted to go. So
No way.
yeah,
That's
I have always wanted to be commissioner. I didn't really know how you got there, how one became commissioner, because I'm honestly I'm not a politician, right? So my background's biology. I've worked my whole life in the field, so it's not like I am not cozy with senators and legislators. Before I didn't have that sort of political influence. So I was fortunate enough to be nominated by Governor Mills and then appointed by the legislature.
Is it just one person that's nominated? Like, are you going up against anybody else?
So there's like an application process. So I applied to be commissioner, and then there's an interview, process, and then the governor makes a selection, and then, but yeah, they in general, there's just one person nominated, and then you go in front of your legislative committee and kind of have a confirmation hearing.
Right.
And Maine had never had a woman in this position before.
Right.
Had there ever been a biologist before?
Yeah, there have been a couple. Bucky Owen was a biologist. Lee Perry were both biologists.
What was the pathway that most of the former commissioners had come through?
I would say most of them, I mean, there's been various pathways, but most often it's a political appointee. So somebody that, has some interest in fish and wildlife, but is active in...
But they don't necessarily need to... I mean, is it like if we get a new administration this year, people who are going to, like, you're in charge of energy, you're in charge of, sometimes you're like, these are random folks who it's more like a friend or something?
Yeah, I think every governor does it a little bit differently. It still has to go in front of a legislative committee. So you have to have some competence. You have some competency in the field. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of times they are people who have been more political than a political background more than a sort of professional background in the field. But Governor Mills has entirely staff who are the cabinet is all folks that have worked professionally in the fields.
Yeah.
So.
And when you landed there, how was the initial reception? Because I would imagine mixed views. I know that I say that only because if you're the first woman, obviously that's news for a lot of like old school Maine hunters, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because I know the kinds of fears that you hear all the time. They're going to shut it all down. They're going to come in here, turn it all to recreation. They're going to. So it must have had some of that going on. And then I know Mills is kind of a controversial character amongst many of those old school hunters as well. Yep. So like, was there pushback, and then was there also great reception? Like, what did you experience on both sides?
So I would say that I guess when I became wildlife director, I was the first female in that position as well. And I guess I probably kind of cut my teeth and proved myself to the hunters through the Bear Referendum. And so they
explain to the listeners about that, because there are people listening
so in
all
2014 we had a referendum on our bear hunting tools, our management techniques, and I was a spokesperson for that for the department for that referendum, and it was very, very public and very vocal. And we were opposed to the limitations, or the referendum was to ban several of the management tools that we use. And so we were very, very much opposed to that. And I was a very vocal figure and participated in lots of debates and, all that sort of stuff. The
people we know who are part of that, I'm thinking of our friend Deb Perkins, who there's almost this feeling of talking about the Bear Referendum to people who are part of it.
They don't want to relive that.
It's like talking to somebody who was in Vietnam, PTSD, and it's just like, you're like, oh man, they've been through it. So that was, that wasn't just like, it was a referendum, but it wasn't like, for people listening, it got pretty heated, and it was also quite a close decision.
It was very heated and pretty unpleasant.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I think, 53-47.
Wow.
So, which is almost exactly what it was the last time. Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of most of the hunters knew who I was, and they sort of had some level of trust in me. I think
because that's the issue, where if you're gonna sell out hunters, it's gonna be on bears probably more than anything. Where that's That's the one that's the hardest for people.
Yeah,
you know. I think.
yeah. People, if you don't participate in it and you haven't spent much time in the North Maine woods, it's hard to understand. Or I can understand where people don't quite get how bear hunting works. But yeah, so I would say most. I mean, it's hard for me to say because most people don't tell me if they don't like me, right? Like, it's not that like the hunters aren't coming up and, you know, they're not saying negative things to my face. And, you know, I knew most of the staff. And of course, again, likewise, now I'm their commissioner. So if they don't like me, they're not going to tell me. So I thought my reception was great.
Either.
I haven't heard a single bad thing about you.
I thought it was excellent.
We'll let you know.
I'm sure it is, you know, I'm sure I'm going to make decisions that people question or don't quite understand or
who wouldn't?
Right. Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about sort of some of the shifts that are happening, because we have a few contacts, I guess male contacts in the department, but we have a lot of female contacts in the department now too.
Yeah.
And it seems like not just a gender sort of change of guard, but also some really fresh perspectives too, which sort of, you know, I get where people get like a little bit stuck and scared of change.
Right.
But to me, you want to be out in front of it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
You don't want to be like the Luddite who's just like, no, we're sticking with horse and buggy. It's like, it's not going to happen no matter how bad you want to. So what are some of those changes like, and how are women represented in the department now?
So a lot of questions right there.
I'm going to fire more at you too.
So let's see. I'll start with some of the changes. I would say, you know, as a woman in a male-dominated field, I felt strongly that I wanted to try and just be a role model and make sure that younger women knew this is a career opportunity for you. It's a great job. I mean, being a wildlife fisheries biologist is phenomenal. You get to be outside. You get to do something you're passionate about. You know, it's a great opportunity. So I wanted to have that influence. And so part of my presence, and I told the governor-elect when I met with her that I'll be the most visible commissioner in the history of the agency. Wow. I will be visible, and I'll be out and I'll be talking to groups, and I did, and I still do, even if it's through Zoom or whatever. But I also, with my background at Audubon, where we were so funded, you know, kind of based on sales and donations, you had to be relevant to the public, and you had to be good communicators. You had to be getting your message out there, or people didn't participate or the donations didn't come in. So when I came to the department, that was really, and it's always been kind of my personal mission, I guess, or where I lean toward is communicating and trying to connect with people. And so I probably spend more time in a lot of the changes that I've made have been in our communications and really trying to give the information and education department the tools and support and the staff they need so that they can communicate with a much broader audience than we've communicated in the past, while still supporting our core customers, right? So we're trying to recruit new people. I mean, there's all these like very obvious reasons. We need to maintain the funding supply for the agency. So as we look nationally and pre-COVID, you know, participation in these activities are declining, or they had been declining on a national scale. Maine was less than most states, but still on a pretty slow but steady
annual
decline.
Sales of licenses for hunting and fishing.
Participants, in hunting and angling. And so one of my goals is we got to reverse that trend, right? I mean, for a lot of reasons, for money, for wildlife management, for social, you know, for people's, like, once you can't manage wildlife, there, you know, when the public is unhappy with the way you're managing wildlife, they have too many deer, basically. They got too many turkeys, they got too many raccoons. Whatever the case may be, they lose trust in their state agency. You become obsolete, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, we have to maintain the volunteer hunters and to a lesser extent anglers. So for a lot of reasons, and you know, the low-hanging fruit for us here in Maine are women. So only 12% of our licensed hunters are women. So if you're going to just look at it from a marketing perspective and recruitment, and you know, where are you going to get the most bang for your marketing dollars? Women are the way to go, because they represent a very small market share. And we know there was unmet demand. So
You also don't have to market as much to get dudes into it, right? Like a lot of dudes are into it.
Yeah, but their numbers are still declining, right?
Yeah.
And so we worked with some national groups and sort of targeted women. And then I think in the past, and this is not just true in Maine, but nationally, folks really focused on young youth. And that seems to make sense. But what the studies show is that basically that you need to focus on people who are in control of their own time. Because people under the age of, like, they can't drive, they have no ability to do these things themselves, right? And so if the parents aren't interested, the children are not going to get that opportunity because they don't have anybody to take them. They don't have any way to get to this place or that place. And so we really focus more on the like 19 to 30-year-olds, trying to market to that group of people. So kind of a combination of trying to promote to more women. And if you look at any of our like Fishing Game Changers, and one of the we met, so I'm on
Fishing
a couple.
Game Changers is the podcast.
It's a podcast, yep. I met with I'm on a couple of different boards of women in conservation and women in wildlife. And there's two barriers that women have identified to participation. And one is gear. I can talk about that, but there's very little gear for women. But the other is that there are no women pictured in any place. And if you don't see yourself in the picture, you can't picture yourself doing it. Yeah. And so we started trying to have pictures of women doing these things that they do. And that's just like a really simple shift, right? Instead of having all men photographed, we have women participating. And so that it's more appealing. You can start to picture yourself. And, as I mentioned earlier, in the most recent statistics I ran just in the past 6 weeks, we've had 2,500 people participate or complete our hunter education course online, and 30% are women.
So actually, let's go back on that, because you said before we started recording, you guys have just switched over to an all online hunter safety course, which is awesome, because that's such a hindrance. I tell people a lot, because we get to help with recruitment in our own way. Yeah. I often tell people, get your hunter safety course now, no matter if you think you'll hunt in the next 5 years or not, because when the time comes and there's an opportunity, you're going to realize that's the bottleneck. Right. And somebody says, we're going hunting next week. Do you want to go? And now you can't because you don't have a hunter safety course.
Right.
Did you switch to the online model because of COVID?
So until we just clarify, you could still take the in-person. You could still you can still do a modified version.
So Mark Doring's not out of work.
Yeah, there's kind of three different options. You can do the fully in-person. You can do a part online where you do the coursework online, and then you have a field day component, or a skills assessment day component, or you can do it fully online. So people still have the options to do whatever way is most preferable for them. And we've been talking about this for about 2 years. Okay. And so it's been a progression of, we moved from all in person to online and a component in person. And then when COVID hit, or when the pandemic really started, we were like, okay, we need to because people were like, how are we going to get hunter safety? Like, we don't want to be in person. We don't want to have that level of exposure with people we don't know. And, so
go sit in a stuffy room and
so that really sort of catapulted it forward. And so, that I would say pushed us to act faster than we may have acted. Right. Without a pandemic like that. But it is something we've been talking about for a couple of years.
This will continue to be the model given that everything goes well?
Yeah, for sure. We'll continue to offer the fully online for folks. I mean, for me, it really articulates, and I think I'm a good example because I, like you, did not grow up hunting. I had never seen a gun in person until I started working for the agency.
No, really?
Yeah, no, never. No.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
And I'm pretty outgoing and pretty social. But when I first started with the agency, I didn't talk for like 6 months because I'm like, all these people have guns. They're walking around with guns. Like I was like, I carry my binoculars. They all got a gun. It was so intimidating.
A gun's kind of like a symbol until you understand them well. You know what I mean? I think because of the way we perceive them from media.
Right.
It's interesting to me because a lot of the celebrities who are anti-gun are also the people who do the gun porn all day long in the movies. And right, you know what I'm saying? It's like you'll see them speaking out in their public service announcement, but every movie poster they are holding a black rifle. Right. And I think it's not because to them the gun is a tool like it is to people who actually use firearms, but because it's symbolic and it represents power. And so then I see when people are first around guns, I mean, they're ready for the thing to go off like a bomb in the room, like it's just going to shoot itself or something, you know? And then as you get more acquainted and it starts to become like a hammer to you, just a tool with a job, you know? But
So, and, you know, so I took hunter safety a long time ago, but, you know, I know from my own experience that class did not get me the comfort level that I needed for actually going out to hunt. And so we'll offer a series of, we're calling them next step programs. So people can do either in person or Zoom, or, you know, even they'll record them so people can watch them. But basically programs to go a little more in depth on, you know, firearm safety, firearm handling, how to set up tree stand, you know, how to track a deer, but all those kind of things that are, there's still the barriers for people to participate. So,
because you know, for me, when I got started, I had already been shooting for a while, which helped. But also I was willing to go up to strangers and ask them to teach me. And I found they were very receptive, but if you're not so a lot of the people who come to me and go, Daniel, you keep saying find a mentor. I don't know how. And it's usually because they're really introverted people and they're afraid to. So I think some of that would be really helpful. Because I think earlier 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a lot of these skills were more common, but we're still using the same kind of programs, but the skills aren't common anymore. I want to go back to the beginning about COVID. I want to thank you for what a great job you did in keeping Maine open to hunting and fishing, and not only not restricting access to the outdoors, but encouraging it. Because I had people contacting me from around the country and in some of the provinces of Canada who were not allowed to hunt and fish. And from the very beginning, the messaging coming out on social media and through the email campaigns was really promoting access to the outdoors. So really good job on that. And thank you. What was some of your thinking then? Because you must have had pressure from both sides of that argument about whether to restrict or to promote. So
my thought was, because it's probably selfishly or self-centered in my approach, in that I got pretty anxious about like what is going on here, and personally, like, I would go to the grocery store and like it was like there had been like a nuclear war or something. Like the shelves were empty, nobody's going near each other. It was like I was just so uncomfortable for me. And every single time after I would go to the grocery store, I would take my dog and we'd go for a walk outside. I had to decompress outside. And so I said to the governor, people are going to need they're going to need to be able to go outside. They're going to need to get physical exercise. And there's all kinds of studies that show outdoor activities improve mental health, right? And so people are going to need to be able to maintain their physical health and their mental health. We need to keep the outside open for everybody. And Governor Mills is such an avid outdoor person. She was like, no,
I didn't
absolutely.
know that about her.
I mean, every time I see her, which is regularly, she's like, where are we going next? What are we doing next?
Oh, good.
No, she's an avid angler, and
she
comes
is.
bird hunting.
What's she like to fish for?
Anything. She likes striper. She really likes striper fishing, but we're going fishing Friday.
Cool. Oh, great.
So we went up Baxter fishing a couple weeks ago. She loves outdoor activities. So, so she was really supportive of getting people, making sure that we could keep people outside. And so I texted her one night because I was running in the morning, and I'm like, what can I do? What can I be going to need to be able to help people? People are going to need help through this really like scary time. And so that's when I was like, you know what? Let's no fishing license is needed. Let's just drop it. Let's just remove that barrier.
Explain what the actual decision was to people, because I benefited from that.
So I mean, it wasn't a huge deal, but it was just I had the governor sign an executive order, so people didn't need a license to fish
for the first month or so, right?
Yeah, for 6 weeks. We did it for a month and a half, so that people could get outside and just give them something to do, so they could go outside with their family. I mean, the kids weren't in school, or half and half. Nobody knew what was going to happen with schools, and
there was sort of some meat shortages too at the time and stuff. So it was just that added. You could imagine for some people it was nice to be able to do that. Also, I think you didn't need a boat registration in the beginning too, right?
Yeah, because it was the towns were closing down, and municipalities
couldn't get to the town hall to get a registration.
And people could do it online, but it was just too complicated. People were stressed. We were like, just ease this up, let it go.
You didn't have to go tag your turkey, your spring turkey.
That's right. released the tagging or made an exemption.
Honor system.
Yep. People didn't have to tag their turkeys. And so, I mean, and just today we were talking about, as we are still in this pandemic, 7 months later, but now we're entering into wintertime and people are going to have to, more inclined to be indoors. And it's probably mentally more challenging for people because they're not going to feel, as many opportunities for be outside. And so I think everybody worries about, how are people going to handle winter. And so we just talked today about working with the commissioner or the communications folks for agriculture, conservation, and forestry, and coming up with ways, reminding people there are lots of activities you can do all fall, all winter to get outside, to stay safe. You can still socially distance and maintain your personal health, but still keep that mental and physical health going. So we'll continue to work on those. I personally think the outdoors are like a remedy for everything.
Me too.
So
Me too. Yeah. And it hasn't felt that crowded. I mean, I am seeing more people out, but I mean, I'm in Bridgeton area, right? Bridgeton, Lovell, Freiburg.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hunters there and there's a lot of anglers, but I haven't had like undue amount of pressure. So it's nice to see that people are out in a more significant way and yet it's not become it's not become a problem.
No, I mean, one of my goals as commissioner is we just developed a strategic plan for the agency, but one of my goals is to make sure that we have places where people can go near to where they live to hunt and fish. And so near population centers, like there's lots of great land conservation projects around the state happening, but I want to make sure that, people that live in Bridgeton, people that live in Portland, people that live in Lewiston, people that live in Bangor have places nearby where they can go. We know access from all kinds of surveys that we've done. Access is a barrier for people as they don't know, they don't know where they can go to hunt. And they don't know where there's good fishing nearby. And so making sure that we have those opportunities and places where people can go to get outside and participate in those activities.
It kind of leads me, I guess actually before I start on this, is there anything that you feel like we left unfinished that you need to say? Because I want to take us into some policy questions that I have.
I can't
Since
remember.
you mentioned your strategic plans.
If there was something, I don't remember what it was. So.
There's so many things. I really want to talk about lead ammunition with you. But before we go there, I want to talk about this idea of access. So for the listener real quick, and please jump in, Maine's kind of unique in the United States in that we're 96% of our forested land is privately held.
Right.
We don't have big tracts of public land.
Right.
And unlike a lot of states where if you're on somebody else's land, you're just straight trespassing. In Maine, we sort of have this thing where unless the land is posted or you've been asked not to be there, you're assumed to have permission, which blows people's minds.
Right.
So I bring people out here to hunt and they're like, no way. And as you don't have to be that intelligent to start figuring out like, man, you can get a lot of places by staying inside if you understand how the rules work.
Right. Yep.
But obviously you want to be respectful of the landowners and all of that too.
Sure.
Now the issue in just the short time that I've been involved in hunting, I have seen tremendous amounts of my favorite hunting spots get posted.
Yeah.
I have wrestled back and forth with posting my own property.
Right.
And I've done it and I've undone it and all of that.
Yep.
And how are we going to deal with this long term? Like, because it's an unusual situation that we're in, the idea that somebody could go and, 50 years ago, the idea that somebody who probably lives real close by, who they are, they're hunting out in your back 40, no big deal. But now you own an acre and a half, and you have no idea, you've bought it, you lived in Massachusetts before, you move up here, and you find somebody with a gun in your backyard, and you're like, what is going on? So there's a clash of times and paradigms, and how are we going to work through this as a state? Because hunting's so important here.
We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, thank you. That's right, our sponsors at Redkill Mountain Homestead Farms wanted to take a moment to say thank you. For their final ad of the 2020 apple season, they asked me to express their overwhelming gratitude for all the support you've shown them this year. They've had such a great time sending boxes of wild apples all over the country. Redkill Mountain is home to a truly unique wild apple savanna. It's never been sprayed, irrigated, or fertilized and contains no grafted trees. To the wild food forager, it's an Eden, a little slice of heavenly, southern-facing slope in the Catskills of upstate New York. Every one of the roughly 2,000 trees produces a unique fruit. And while this is the stuff of cider-making legend, their dream was to share the whole fruits. And that's how their apple boxes were born. The trees let their fruits go a bit early this year, so the last wild apple boxes will be shipping this Sunday. If you still haven't tried the wild apples from Redkill Mountain, this is last call for 2020. The apple tasting box is 1.5 pounds of hand-selected wild fruit, and the cleanse is 3 pounds. You can still get the incredible wild apple molasses all year long. Remember, that's the syrup made from reducing cider down until it's as thick as maple syrup, and it's delicious. In fact, apple molasses was once a critical sweetener throughout much of the Northeast, but Redkill Mountain is now one of only 3 commercial producers still offering it. Get your last call wild apple boxes and your apple molasses all year long at Redkill Mountain Homestead Farms, where the coupon code WildFed20 gets you 20% off. And Redkill Mountain, Matthew and Ashley, on behalf of us all, thank you for supporting this show and helping to bring it to all of our incredible listeners. We look forward to hearing from you next season. Now, back to the show.
So there's lots of things that we can do and that we are doing. And so some of it is just education to licensed hunters and reminding them that we do encourage everybody to have permission to be hunting on the
But you guys
property.
email about, I'd say once a month I get an email that's sort of a reminder
and
about
so a
that.
lot of that, with our, that was one of the changes that I made, was kind of whatever. I switched up the outreach and communications division a bit, and so there just the level of information coming out is just
great work
phenomenal.
on that, by the way.
Yep,
I'm loving the emails,
Yes.
and I'm also loving the social media presence that
Yep.
you have personally and that the department has,
Yep.
because I feel like I'm in communication with the
Right.
department in a way I'd never
Yes.
felt before. So
Yep.
that's really nice.
So there's lots of messaging going out about respecting landowners, making sure you have permission, all that kind of stuff. And so that's one avenue. Our goal really is to try and prevent bad behavior. So to educate people, and one of the kind of aspects of hunter safety is there's this behavior component, but people only have to take hunter safety once, right?
Yeah.
So our goal is to try and kind of remind them of those things
Yeah.
annually, to remember to do this, remember to do that. And so we'll continue to do that. We also have a landowner relations, two corporals in the warden service that work exclusively on helping landowners resolve issues. And so, but it's going to continue to be a challenge for us as hunting numbers grow. We've got to have more people participating, and
But also as gentrification happens
right,
more
and
too.
we are seeing right now lots of people from out of state are viewing more rural states as safer places to be, and perhaps as telecommuting opportunities increase, we're seeing more people move into the state basically, which is great for us. But they might not be as familiar with how it's always operated here, and so that will continue to be a challenge for us.
It's a hard one because I see both sides. I just bought 17 acres because it was about to sell.
Yep.
And it's behind my house, and this was as part of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So there's the part of me that gets that begrudgingly. It's like I know we need the money in the state. We it's good to have people coming here. We want a diverse community.
Right.
But God, don't come here and make it like the place you just fled, right?
Right.
So that's
Yeah,
one component of it.
Yeah.
I also get the thing of like, hey, I don't care what the story was here before. I just bought this.
Right.
And I'm not letting you on it. Like
Right.
I see that too.
Yep.
I believe in people's land rights, and so I mean this is like this complex
Right.
issue where
Yep.
it seems like communication is important, but then how do you get around this piece of, okay, if I'm out hunting and I run into a birder, there's always going to be the part of me that wishes I was alone and all of that, but I'm not like threatened by a birder.
Right.
But if I'm in the woods with a gun and I run into a birder,
Yeah.
that birder might feel real uncomfortable about me, maybe because of firearms in general, maybe because they detest hunting or something like that, or they just, they're there, they believe that wildlife is there for observing only.
Yep.
And so a lot of people who are coming here from out of state come with views more like that. And so how are we going to, there's not really a question there, but like, what do we do, Judy? What are we going to do? What's the strategic plan say?
Yeah. Well, I think the only thing we can probably do right now is just to continue to try and communicate and educate people, both people that are out hunting and people that are out birding or hiking, and making sure everybody understands what the other groups are doing and what you can expect from them. We do expect our hunters to be well behaved. We expect our anglers to be well behaved and respectful, and
they need to be at this point in history.
We expect our birders to be well behaved, and everybody. There are bad apples in all those groups, right? So we need to make sure that everybody's respecting landowners.
I would think you got more bad apples in some hunting than
I was going
birding.
to say, what does a bad apple birder look like?
I know, it's like, I don't care if you point your binoculars at me, but sure as hell don't point your gun at me,
We've had issues with
aggressive birders.
Peeping
No,
birders?
not so much that. Just being in places they shouldn't be,
be,
and trespass issues and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
The hunting on Sundays thing is really interesting because, again, this is one where I see a couple of sides of this. I see the residual blue law thing, which seems, well, first of all, I think a day of rest is an awesome idea. In general, I like the idea. But, if we're not going to pray in school anymore, I'm like, why do we have laws that seem like antiquated from days of when everybody was going to church? But then I also see if I'm a landowner and I'm going to allow people on my property without real permission and they can just be on my property, I'd like to have a day where I know I can be out with my kids and my dog and I'm not having to worry about that. Is that play into it at all? Because some people tell me that's the reason. Some people say no, it's just left over from when Christendom was more pervasive as a state religion. So why do we have this?
So for certain, the Sunday, I actually got a phone call just last week with this gentleman insisting that he had a topic that he had to talk to me about, and it was Sunday hunting, and had we thought about how we were going to allow Sunday hunting, and as though it had never come up before.
Certainly she's never thought about it.
It comes up there's probably 7 bills every legislative session on ways to allow Sunday hunting. Allow it in the North Maine woods only. Allow it with landowner permission only. In WMD 1 and 2 only. And so there's been every derivation of ways to allow Sunday hunting, upland bird only, right? For everything you could think of, they've tried it. They've tried it, and it is truly the landowners that are they are not comfortable. With
that
allowing,
is really what's going on.
That is the issue from a biological standpoint. We could manage.
What about in public lands only?
That's come up, absolutely.
Because the challenge is when you just have Saturday and Sunday, obviously, and now you can only hunt one day of your weekend.
I mean, the landowner's perspective with something like with landowner permission only or public lands only is that once you allow it, but those kind of things they sound good on paper, enormously difficult to enforce. Right. So how is a game warden going to enforce? Oh, I thought I was on the state park property. Right. So those are really difficult to enforce. But also their perspective is once that happens, it's going to just flip over to everything. And the landowners, both the large landowners and the small landowners, have really consistently spoken out against Sunday hunting. And since 96% of the state is privately owned, that's
an easy sell for me, honestly. Like that's good messaging, because it's like, hey, if you're going to be on other people's property, you got to give them a day of rest.
Sure.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Where are we headed with non-lead ammunition? Actually, let me back up before you say that. I hadn't really seen that come up in the state before until very recently. I was already making that shift, and my friend Arthur Haynes was pushing me in that direction. Do you know Arthur?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So he was always pushing me in that direction, not just for wildlife, but for human health. And there's some interesting studies on lead and meat that's been hunted. So I got onto copper monolithics, and I've been on tungsten bismuth for birds for a while. And obviously the federal migratory birds are, non-lead. So this seems like such a good direction. You know who else is non-lead and has been for a while? Steve Vernella. So that whole Meteor crew, and they've got a line now of ammunition. The way that the emails have rolled out, it does make me anticipate a future where there's no lead hunting here. So I'm curious if you're willing to say if we're heading in that direction.
So that's absolutely not the direction we're heading.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yep. No. And so our goal is educate people, trying to share the benefits of non-lead ammunition in hopes of avoiding legislation.
Oh,
So,
great.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I don't want to get to a place where this is something that's mandated. I want people to switch over
yeah.
at a rate, and once they start seeing the benefits of the non-lead ammunition, then they'll become users and subscribers, and then hopefully there'll be, more of a market demand for it. And so as soon as we sent that those press releases out, then all of a sudden, I mean, there's no ammo at all right now, but there's absolutely no non-lead ammo. So then we were like, oh God, there's nothing. You
So
can't get
the
it.
advertising worked.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if it was our advertising or just nationally
There's
there is
no
a
ammo.
shortage
Yeah.
of ammunition.
I've paid some pretty crazy premiums recently.
Right, yeah. So, and that's just a function of kind of the times, I think.
Yeah.
And so, but no, there's no goal. There's certainly no interest in mandating that or passing any kind of legislation. And most of the
There's a lot of
northeastern
rumors,
states, yeah, I know. But all the northeastern states, the Northeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, signed on to trying to help promote a non-regulatory approach to encouraging.
Who signed on for that?
So the Northeast Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies.
How many states is that?
13, I think.
Oh,
so
great.
it's the whole Northeast.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. So this
Yeah, 13
messaging
or
is going to
16.
continue to roll
Yep,
out.
yep.
It was interesting. I was at a gun shop recently, and the guy was sort of showing me, like, look, man, I do have some ammo, But he's like, I'm really concerned about all these lead hunting rounds that he's sitting on.
Yeah.
For this reason.
Right. Yep.
So he'll be relieved to know that he.
Yeah,
but it does seem like.
Yep.
It's such an obvious direction.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
Yep.
kind of a no-brainer, and I think the couple of things that that stood out to me for the challenges. The biggest one, obviously, people's fear about ballistics, terminal ballistics,
Right.
which with what I'm shooting, I harvested 2 deer on a nuisance permit. That it was just devastating.
Yep.
And then I took a very healthy large boar this year.
Oh. Huh.
I was very impressed
Yeah.
with the performance of these
Yeah.
copper monolithics. So that was one concern. The other thing was just like, all my guns are sighted into specific
Right,
rounds and
right.
specific
Yep.
loads. And it was like having to go resight all the
Right.
guns with
Yep.
just very expensive
Yep.
ammunition. And,
Right.
all good hunting ammunition is expensive. But
Right.
switching over and knowing I got to shoot a box through it before I have my
Right.
zero really where I want it and all of that was what held me back for a
Yep.
while.
Yep.
But I got to say now all I have left is 22 is what I have
Yep.
yet to switch over. But everything else is switched over, and I like this direction. And however we can be another voice supporting that direction,
great.
we're here
Yeah.
for that
Yeah,
because
thank
we're pumped about it. We happened to send out an email about it the first day. We got an email from you guys about it,
Okay.
and it was
Great,
like, oh,
great.
interesting.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
day. It was
Oh,
like
that's
we
funny.
were
Yeah.
saying that same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, lead ammunition. What else I want to ask about? Mourning doves. Why can I not hunt a mourning dove in Maine? Because there are plenty of mourning doves around. Now I know we're not like a state where we're gonna have these big shoots like they do
Right.
down south.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
man, if I see a pair of them in the backyard, sometimes my mouth is watering, and it's like, it could be such a low bag limit.
Right. Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah. It's just something that's historically that we've not done. And
But you're just changing history, though.
Yeah. Right. I know. I'm making some changes, but I don't know that there is the social appetite for that here right now. And so the states that have tried to introduce mourning dove hunting have just really not been successful.
Number one species, I think, as far as
for sure.
number of
Absolutely.
animals harvested,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
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 All right. Well,
I know.
if it ever comes
I mean,
around.
you can pitch that to the bird folks and see if they want to take it up, but
Kelsey,
Yeah.
pulling at him. Kelsey, how would people respond to the big shift in the turkey fall take? I've been really loving the 5 birds.
Yeah.
Have the numbers gone up significantly?
So I just looked at the dashboard today, and I think we're at like 3,200 or so, 3,600 turkeys, which is
Fall or
fall,
for the year?
just fall,
Fall,
just
yeah.
fall. So I don't think it's up too far yet. I can't remember what the total was last year, but when I talked to Kelsey last week, he thought it was about on par.
But last year was 5 as well, correct?
Yep.
And was that number up from the previous year?
I still don't think it goes up too far. I don't think there's too many people that are taking 5.
It's hard to. I've taken
yeah.
only 2,
Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm getting 5 this year.
Right.
Last year,
Yeah.
I don't think I took a single one in the
Right.
fall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this year, I've just been picking away at it. Now, what I enjoy, so I carry a shotgun and a 22 at the same time, because I'll squirrel hunt my way through the woods.
Yeah.
And then if I can bump up a turkey, then that's great too.
Yeah.
But
no, people are liking the turkey. So, and there's we've had a lot fewer complaints, so that's good with turkeys. And I mean, I personally think turkeys and, you know, are a great entryway for people into hunting, and upland birds are great too, but by and large you mostly need a dog, so that's a little bit of a barrier for people. But turkeys, especially spring turkey, it's interactive, it's pretty fast paced, there's a pretty good success rate, you know, you get a lot of opportunity. The birds, when they're there, they're calling, they're active. I mean, I think turkey are a great introductory species for people.
Springtime. Fall's a hard one to introduce to somebody because it's a weird hunt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's very opportunistic,
right.
Or I'm doing real sneaky,
right.
stalking in and being kind of nasty to them. But
I kind of enjoy the fall hunt more.
I do too, but I'm just, it's a hard one to bring somebody out for the first time.
Right.
It's like, wait, we're doing what now?
Because I think my first turkeys were in fall.
Yeah, but you had been out that spring with me filming turkeys too, so you understood the turkey game a little bit.
I harvested my first grouse a couple weeks ago.
Oh, yeah?
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
That was awesome.
Yeah, so what's because you came into this without a hunting background, and then...
I was vegetarian for 15 years.
Okay, I have a similar background as a vegan for a long
Into your
time.
job as commissioner, were you vegetarian?
No. So I was vegetarian for like from college up until I was like 35. As soon as I left home, so like my freshman year in college, until I was like 35. But mostly my body just stopped processing soy. So there was like so few things I could eat as a vegetarian. Like my doctor was like, you need to switch over. Like you're not healthy. And so I started eating meat, and then I just decided, like, if I'm going to eat meat, I would much rather eat meat that I procure and harvest myself. So I'm still not that successful at that, but I've been trying.
You've been bird hunting a lot, though. Because I know some folks who hunt with you, and so it's like, that's all. I like that story, too. Because I have more policy stuff I want to get back to in a minute. No, I want to go this direction for now. So I'm just saying, no, I'm going to bring you back there. But how is it for you, again, being at Audubon?
Yeah.
Being into ornithology and knowing things about birds and loving birds and appreciating birds in a way that a lot of people don't have that richness or depth.
Right.
And then harvesting them, I understand. And I think most of our listeners understand. But how has that been for people who, like, for you personally, that journey, and then for people who maybe are like, wait, how can you love birds and then also shoot them?
Right, and eat them. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a lots of ways you can look at it. One is when I was at Audubon, one of my most trusted kind of birding advisors was this gentleman, Donnie Mayers. He was an avid hunter. And so one of my best like birding mentors was an avid hunter. So for me, the two were never incompatible. And for me, I had always had a lot of respect for hunters who were able to go out and, spend the time in like the very wee hours of the morning, and you're up, and it's physical, and it's oftentimes uncomfortable. So I've always had a lot of respect for hunters and people that put in that level of effort. And so for me, it was not always compatible. That's not to say that some birders are like, what, you hunt, or but I think when you understand, and I mean, I personally, I like knowing where my meat comes from. Yeah. It's really important for me to know that the animal died humanely. And when I was vegetarian, that was mostly the reason I didn't eat meat, was because I didn't know how the animals at the grocery store what their life was like. And for me, an animal that lives...
You can surmise it wasn't very good, right?
But for me, an animal that lives its whole life out in the wild, and I am the one that, I conduct I kill it myself, that's so much more comfortable for me than not knowing how that animal lived. And so I'm wicked empathetic, like I'm a huge, empath. And so for me, not knowing how the animals died was always a barrier for eating meat. Yeah. So then when I started eating meat, it was a pretty, easy transition to wanting to eat wild game.
It's interesting with animals in captivity because they'll live longer, but they're not free. But then on a farm scenario, they're not free and they don't live longer.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's interesting to me that some years I'll eat a bear that's 2 years old, and some years I'll eat a bear that's 16 years old.
Yeah.
And that they get a fair chance.
Yep.
And none of these animals feel bad about eating other animals.
Right.
And nobody's out. Very few people. I have actually seen it, but there are very few people who are out, protesting for animals to stop eating other animals. Like, do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like when you meet
yes.
those people, you're like,
Yes.
cuckoo,
Yes.
you've gone
Right,
way
right,
too
right.
far with
That's
this
too far
thing.
down
Like,
the
we're
line.
not
Yeah.
going to stop lions
Yeah.
from eating gazelles.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of the problems that we look at in the world, it's like you could turn on the news and watch all these problems, and many of them can be sort of, at least in my opinion, can be reduced down to humans forgetting that they're animals.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's starting to think that we're
Yeah.
angels of some
Right.
kind or astronauts from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's like, we could, I find hunting is so humbling in that it's a reminder of death, which is like a good thing to
Right.
stay reminded of.
Yep.
It's like you get pretty far out there when you
Right.
forget you're going to go sometime.
Right.
But also that you're a participant in an
Right.
ecosystem, not
Yes.
just a visitor
Yep.
to it,
Yep. I mean, and the other thing too is that, I'm on Maine's Climate Council, and, I've read lots of different articles, but of what things people can do to help minimize their climate footprint. And one thing we can all do is source your food locally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, sourcing my food locally myself, I believe is helpful. It's a simple thing I can do. And it not only is there like the animal ethics, but there's also just the climate ethic for me. So for me, it just kind of hits every level of the way I want to live.
I love that. We've been talking about David Attenborough's newest documentary, and I was just so surprised to have him say we need to rewild the world.
Yeah.
And then him kind of promoting hunting and gathering and promoting wild fisheries in a way that I would have expected him to go another direction.
Right. Yep.
But he'd worked enough, I think, with indigenous hunter-gatherers and understood.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that farming is habitat that used to be for animals that's now just for people's plants. And it's like, so anyway, it's neat to see that perspective. All right, I got another policy question.
Okay.
Crossbows.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a cool one. Maine's allowed the use of crossbows during the archery season, which I don't do much bow hunting. I will now more that I can use a crossbow.
Right.
I like things with triggers, but the bow people are often a little bit, and we'll see how it actually pans out over the years.
Yep.
But not just in Maine, but across the country, they tend to have a bias, archery people, against crossbows.
Absolutely. Yep.
But then I spoke to a guy who teaches hunting just outside New York City, and he was saying to me, listen, we've got all these archery areas.
Right.
He's like, I can bring new people into hunting with a crossbow in a day.
Yep.
He's like, I can teach them that morning, they can harvest a deer that afternoon, and they're successful, and they will continue to be conservationists.
Right.
What was your thinking in all of this? How are people responding to it? And then I have a follow-up after that.
Okay, so this law was passed by the legislature. We were sort of neither here nor there, or sometimes we take a position and support.
Oh, the department didn't decide.
We did not. No, the legislature made this decision.
Somebody brought it before them.
Yep. And so, and it's a fine line for us because there's a lot of archers that were not supportive, and so we want to make sure that our customers are happy, but we also want to make sure that we're not just doing things the way we've always done them, because that's the way we've always done things, right? And so technology is changing. A lot of the compound bows are changing. All that technology
Garmin's got a red dot sight with a GPS component built into it on a compound bow at this point.
It's all changing, and some of the other barriers or obstacles to participation in traditional kind of firearm season is it's cold, it starts to snow, it gets dark, it's dark earlier in Maine. And so having crossbows be available for people in the archery season, it changes that, right? So it's warmer, the days are still longer, and a lot of people, crossbows they're so much easier to use than a traditional bow. And so it's another good entry point for new hunters. I know 5 women who have never harvested a deer before and harvested with a crossbow this year.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So
cool. Congratulations to them.
I think it's going to be a great, I'll be curious to see how it plays out with the traditional archers, and I think they're mostly worried about their quality of hunt.
Yeah, I think so too. They're always like, you're gonna wound so many deer. It's like, oh, come on, people are out there with 30-06s all the time. What are you talking about? I think it's that you don't want any people out there while you're bow hunting, and understandable again.
Sure,
but we've got to think
experience
long term about participation, right?
Yep.
Will we maybe I shouldn't frame it like that, but I'll just say something I would love to see is the crossbow safety integrated into the archery safety.
Right.
Because right now, where it stands is you have to take a separate safety course to operate a crossbow.
Right.
And they're not so different, I feel like, that they couldn't, in many states, combine them. So at this point, I would have hunted this year with my crossbow, except that I need to do the online course, and it was hard to fit it into my schedule.
Right. Yep. So there is a fully online crossbow course, but we are also looking at trying to have it be incorporated both to the firearm safety.
Oh, great.
And the archery class. That would be so that good. You just need the one or the other.
More integrated approach.
Yep, more integrated for
bears in Maine. So the number I always see is around 35,000 black bears. Something like that.
It's a little low, but 47 probably.
What's that?
I think our revised estimate's a little closer to like 45,000
bears.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so bear population's going up. A lot of talk about social carrying capacity. Obviously, the landscape can support these bears, but the people can't have bears in their backyards all the time. It's not gonna. That's not gonna fly. We have currently one bear per person and a second bear with trapping. Obviously, I just got my first trapping license the other day.
Yeah,
Came in the mail yesterday.
Awesome.
Actually, I'm very excited. So a second bear possible through trapping, although currently the participation in that must be fairly
pretty low.
Yep. Is there any talk about a spring bear hunt or a second tag or anything like that in the future, or are they over? Is the conversation about there needing to be more take overblown? Because I think the last numbers we saw, what is the annual harvest, about 3,500 bears?
Yeah, at 37 right now this year.
What's the goal?
Closer to 445.
Okay, so not too many more.
Yeah, no. So a couple things to answer your question. So we actually had a bill in the legislature this past session, which would allow people to take up to 2 bears, no more than 2, but you could take 2 by hunting.
Wow.
So you could take 2 by hunting, only 1 by trapping.
So you could potentially get 3.
No, so no more than 2.
Oh, got it.
Either
no more than
2 through hunting, or one hunting, one trapping.
Yeah.
You still could only take 1 through trapping. If you took 1 through trapping, then you could only get 1 through hunting. But that passed our committee, but then the legislature, they
imagine they get a little apprehensive about anything that has the word bear on it, or no?
Well, everybody's nervous around bears, but they did pass that.
It's like you don't want to get the eye of Sauron, like PETA's eye, to like turn towards your state. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So but our committee passed that, but then the pandemic happened and the legislature didn't convene, so it never actually made it through the full legislature. So we will bring that back this coming session with a request to authorize up to 2 bears. And we have not considered a spring season. And my feeling is that in general, the general public is not real supportive of hunting when there are young animals on the landscape. And so our biologists, they feel that we could have we used to have a spring bear hunt, and they feel that we could have a spring bear hunt. But my personal feeling is that until the public tells us they want that, we're not going to go there. Yeah. And so there's a lot of other things that we can continue to do that we can try, but that we're going to exhaust those methods before we would talk about a spring bear hunt. And I don't think we'll see that in my tenure.
Hey, how does that work actually, your tenure? Like, how is
right. So I'm appointed by the governor. And
when did you start? Start date?
But fluster me, 2018, January 2018.
Okay, cool. Yep.
Or I forget, whenever Governor Mills was elected in 2018, I think. So it would have been, whatever. I've been in for about a year and a half.
Okay.
So it'll be 2 years this January. So 18. And so if Governor Mills is reelected, hopefully she would reappoint me.
So the governor reappoints every...
So the governor appoints, and then the legislature confirms.
Every time there's an election?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so I hope that she...
So aside from doing a good job, there's nothing you do. It's not like you're campaigning like a sheriff would or something like that.
No.
And there's no... Okay, got it.
No. And so then, presumably, in 6 years, when the governor is termed out, then a new governor would they would have the choice to keep me or replace me.
Right.
And so I think most of the time I know most of the time they replace the cabinet.
They do.
Yeah. There's a few commissioners that have stayed on through different governors, through different administrations, and so it's always a possibility. But by and large, I mean, Fish and Wildlife's relatively non-political. We're we're not as controversial, or
it's just like, unfortunately, everything's becoming so political, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think before I want to talk about what kind of goals you have during your tenure, but I'm just trying to think if there's any more policy questions. I'll just throw one little one out there. This is like, we're getting down to my smallest things. I wish we could spear pike. That's so random. But have you ever seen Dark House pike spearing stuff?
No,
have you seen that? So you're in a ice shack that you black out, and so the ambient lights. So you're looking down at a kind of a clear floor or a translucent floor, and you drill holes in there, and a lot of times they'll hang like little decoys in there, whatever. You bring in the pike by, and then they spear them that way. And we do have some places where the pike are obviously, introduced and or
problematic,
becoming kind of problematic. And I'm always I see that in other states, and I go like, that'd be so cool, because spear fishing, and I know most of this is going to fall to outside your jurisdiction and into Department of Marine Resources, but I've got a friend, Dylan, who spearfishes down on the coast, and there's only a couple species he can take because they're unregulated species, right?
Yep.
So he's always having to go down to Rhode Island to spearfish and all of this, and we have this really cool potential fishery. But then obviously as you come inland, we spear suckers in the spring. But I'm always like, man, it would be cool to be able to either bowfish or spear pike. I know that's really random.
Well, you're bringing that up with the Fisheries Division, and
I'll throw that out there.
The only other thing I can think of is hunter orange hair to stay, like requirement.
Sure.
Oh, it's got to be. Why would you change that?
No, I wouldn't change it.
What about hunter pink though?
No.
Or what's the other one? Chartreuse.
Yeah, there was a bill passed. I think not this 2 years ago, the last full session, and so if you are Amish, then you can wear hunter red.
Yeah. Oh, I was wondering whose law, because it just says in there if you have a religious prohibition against wearing orange.
It was brought forward by one community, but
I thought maybe that was an indigenous thing. I was like, who would need to wear red?
Yeah.
And I was like,
I guess orange is considered an offensive color for that particular religion.
I wonder if it's because it's ostentatious, because they have a big thing about prideful displays, why they don't like buttons and things like that. Right?
Yep.
I just asked because of New Hampshire, basically. Like it's suggested.
You don't have to wear a helmet over there either, but
the free or die.
Yeah, no. We like. I mean, the hunting incidents have gone down dramatically since the.
Yeah, there's pretty solid science.
Yeah, since the implementation of.
But what about some states have switched over to pink, or no, not switched over, allowed pink for women hunters as some kind of.
Why
it seems like a very
hunters, Daniel.
That's true, Grant. But I just because we're having that conversation, it's not much of a dangly carrot. But I'm sure there's some women who are like, okay, I wear pink, I'll go.
Sure. Yeah. So I think some of the science behind the hunter orange is basically like how well it shows up in the woods,
most
and so
color
that's why they
eye.
picked orange.
Yeah, wavelength.
I know when I've met with some of the women of the outdoor groups, there's a lot of. I mean, there's some. I personally love pink. It's like my favorite color, but a lot of women despise the fact that there's like camo pink and all that stuff's in pink.
They find it demeaning, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Pink guns and stuff.
Yes,
I don't want a pink gun.
I don't think we will go forward with a hunter pink request, but
it's so funny though, because sometimes I feel bad for women who do like that. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
Like women who like kind of what is stereotypical classical feminine, because they're now getting edged out, like as if it's sort of demeaning to women to be that way, where it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. I feel like we're getting kind of weird here.
I think it's because when I worked in the region, I wore a uniform every day, and all the clothes we had were men's. So I wore a man's uniform. So I always had on a pink scarf, and I was like, I am not a man. Yeah. I am a woman. I'm going to look like a woman. I want, I don't need to be in just green and khaki and men's Carhartts, So I've always worn pink, and it's like my signature pink scarf.
On this topic, is there anything, I guess as two guys, and for all the men listening, is there anything that would be useful to say to us about how we can better support women coming into this, maybe in ways that we don't think about right off the bat, that are maybe something that you hear discussed amongst women, but Like, I know a lot of guys are like, come on, baby, we're going hunting. But, like, is there stuff that
Right.
we're not thinking about that might be useful?
Well, I think there's some, and I've had some really good male mentors and folks who have taken me out and helped. But I've also had people who are like, here, give me that. Let me show you. And so that physically taking the gun and doing this, or, like there's some approaches that women probably, it turns them off. That sort of, I think you've probably all heard the like mansplaining, that kind of stuff is.
That's one of those
a little
terms that we
tiresome.
understand what it means, but
Yeah.
it's also annoying when we hear it. But
Right,
we do understand what it means.
Right. I'll tell you a story. I had a gentleman come in who was meeting with me about, this is when I was commissioner, about some fishing regulations, and he actually said to me, he said, I'm glad to see you're taking notes. He goes, I know you understand more than you look like.
Oh.
And I was like, thank you so much for your time. This meeting's over.
Yeah, goodbye.
Right. So there's still that,
I'm so glad you understand where the door is.
there's still, so that's the sort of thing that,
Yeah.
that really is not helpful. That's not
like
helping anybody.
I feel like that's a dying generation,
I
but
hope
it's
so.
still present,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Also, it occurs to me that some, like, I know Christy puts, what is it called? The women's sportsman thing? What does
Maine
she
women
call it?
hunters?
Maine women hunters.
Yep.
That seems to me like the kind of thing we need more of, where women
Right.
can learn from other women
Yep.
and take the kind of the mansplaining part out of the equation. Yeah, buddy.
That's my dog.
Hey,
Sorry.
Mason.
Oh, well, I mean, I think there's, I think there are lots of opportunities to provide more women instructors, more women participants, and more women teaching women. I don't want to diminish all the men who have helped.
No, of course not.
I don't want to sound like that at all. And
You don't. I don't think you.
No,
you do
most
at all.
of George Smith would die because he was my first, my first hunting partner. So he'd be so offended if he, and he doesn't have these very low key and supportive and helpful. But I think the more opportunities we can provide for women, and the more kind of safe places you can go to ask questions where you
Right.
don't feel like, so for me, coming in as a non-hunter to the agency, the criticism I would always have of some other people is that, one, you don't hunt. So people look down on you. They look down on you if you don't hunt. And then if you don't hunt deer, if you just upland bird hunter, there's a little bit of, they look down on
that
you
ain't
with it.
hunting.
And then if you hunt deer, but you're not after a big buck, so there's so many levels of sort of arrogance so my suggestion is like, embrace people for whatever they want to participate, however they want to hunt, and support that. It doesn't matter whether you want to hunt squirrel, if you want to trap beaver, if you want to hunt deer or moose or bear or, pheasants, whatever. It's all a awesome way to participate in the outside. And we should be embracing and supporting each other and lifting each other up, and not kind of looking down at
diminishing.
diminishing
Yeah, because
people's-
I feel like as like in any organization, you need people who are doing every job.
Right.
It's like you
Yeah,
do need
absolutely.
the people who kick down doors and grab terrorists in the night.
Oh,
but
yeah, of course,
those people
yeah.
need to eat, and those people
Right.
need
Yeah,
like their
yeah,
clothes, and
absolutely.
they need to
Yeah.
have their
Yep.
weapons maintained, and they
Yeah.
need logistics,
Right.
and they need. I mean,
Yep.
you just need people doing every part
Right.
of it, right? So
Yeah.
it seems like,
Yep.
yeah, and I've encountered that a lot too, because I'm just don't really care about the trophy side of
Right.
hunting.
Yep.
And so there are so many people I meet who can't get their head. I will say they're guys can't get their head around it.
Right.
Can't understand this perspective,
Yeah.
and I'll be like, yeah, but like the coyote's not, the wolf who hunts is not looking for the biggest bull elk.
Right,
That would
right.
be crazy. That's a death
Right,
sentence.
right.
You look for the
Yeah.
animal you can get.
Yeah,
And so
I will say that I think that dynamic is changing, and more when we survey people. We just did a survey of, I guess it was actually our staff, but there's a national survey that was just done as well, and it shows that only like three or fewer percent of people are actually interested in a trophy.
Right.
The
Oh,
vast
interesting.
majority of hunters are
Food.
interested in the experience, the food, the connection with
Yeah,
family, the
right.
time outside. The trophy is a minority of folks.
That's good to hear, and I full respect for people who
Sure.
because
Oh,
of
yeah.
the amount of detective work it takes
yeah.
to do that. But
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
not.
yeah.
I'm just too
Yeah.
much of a generalist. By the way, that eider decoy is so cool.
Yeah,
I really
thanks.
like that. All right, so I guess really kind of want to just wrap up with, tell me where you want to see all this go under your tenure. I imagine there's more you would like to do than you can really do, and
right,
you know,
sure.
and like time
Yeah.
moves fast, and
Yeah.
and there's so much. I'm sure there's a lot of inertia, institutional inertia, and resistance to all kinds of things. But like, how do you want your tenure at the department to be remembered, and what's the direction, the general thrust of your work?
Yeah, so I have a few kind of big picture goals, I would say. One of them is communication. And so communicating with a broader audience of people and mostly, you know, hunters, anglers, trappers, and birders, hikers, bikers, and people that don't do any of those things. I want them all to understand what their state Fish and Wildlife Agency does, who we are, and how we benefit them. Because we benefit everybody in this state,
right,
whether they participate in those activities or not. So I want communication is for sure one of my top priorities. Also internal communication with our staff, right? So I think having come from within the agency, I really feel passionate about making sure staff have the opportunity to engage, to participate, that they have a voice in the management and how we run this agency. I believe I work, you know, there's 325 people in my agency. I work for them. Like, it's not the other way around. So I'm there to take care of them. I'm there to make sure that they're safe, that they have the money, that we have the money that they need to do their job, so they have the tools and all the, you know, support that they need to do their jobs. So communication, both externally and internally, is really important to me. Recruiting new people to what I call the community of fish and wildlife. And so recruiting new people, new participants, both in hunting and fishing and birding and just outdoor activities in general. So that whole R3 program is pretty key for me. I think access to the outdoors is really important. And so providing opportunities for people to get outside safely, making sure that we have an education program to help them do those things is super important. And I think it would be impossible for me to not talk about climate change as a you know, a priority for not just myself, but for the governor's administration, and trying to start addressing, or at least mitigating, some of the impacts for climate change, thinking about how we're going to manage wildlife species moving forward in the next 5, 10, 20 years, how we're going to manage.
Not necessarily in mitigation, since that's not really something that the department can.
No, but you know, if deer populations are moving further north, how are we going to adjust to that?
Right.
How are we going to manage?
How are you going to adjust policy for wildlife
exactly.
and manage wildlife? Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and so
I hadn't thought about that before, actually.
And then really good customer service. And so making sure that the people that we interact with have a good experience with us, that they have get a good hunt, that when they call the department, they get good customer service, that our, you know, all of our processes are
I always do, by
simple,
the way. I call a lot. Anytime I run into, you know, interpreting all the laws, it can be complex. And I call a lot to talk to a warden. I call a lot with just random questions that pop up. And everybody's been... I always feel like
you'll get a call back. You know, it's really cool.
Yeah.
And you get this sense like, hey, we work for you feeling, which is really cool, you know?
Yeah, and we do. Yeah, we're
like
public servants, so yeah, for sure. So those are probably my big picture things, and none of those are small.
Yeah.
But you know, and obviously part of that is trying to recruit more women, both professionally. The agency is still mostly male, and so trying to recruit more women professionally, recreationally, more women participating in these activities, but just trying to have a good representation of the people of the population, so that I want everybody to know, whatever your race, gender, whatever, like, we're here for you. These activities are for everybody. This is not an exclusive club.
Right.
It is not, you know, some network that you don't belong to. We're here for everybody. And we've got things, and there's all kinds of things that we do. We've got like a breeding bird atlas. We've got dragonflies, damselflies. So if you don't want to hunt, we've got about 15 different citizen science programs that people can participate in, that they can go out and, you know, look at vernal pools. They can count dragonflies. They can count butterflies. They can count bees. They can count great blue herons, riverbirds. There's all kinds of opportunities.
These are citizen science projects.
For citizen science projects,
really
for
cool.
people to engage well beyond just what they normally think of with fish and wildlife. And I guess one last thing I did want to say is that the other which is, I lost this train of thought earlier. The other side, and I've always acknowledged this as a birder, you have to recognize that the money that comes into the agencies, which are the wildlife agencies across the country, from hunting and fishing activities is how we manage all wildlife species, right? So the money that's coming in from hunting and fishing is how we manage bald eagles. It's how we manage piping plovers. It's how we manage New England cottontails. So that funding provides management not just for the game species, but for most all the non-game species.
Yeah.
So reptiles and amphibians don't qualify for that funding, but for everything else in the state, that is how we pay for those activities. They have their own little funding.
I always
pool,
think one of the things that really I'm not looking to open this can of worms, except just slightly going to peel the cat back.
Okay. Yeah.
It's interesting to me because of the national firearm debate.
Right.
That when somebody goes and buys a Glock handgun
Right.
that they will never hunt with,
Right.
this is their home defense
Yeah.
gun or their
Yep.
carry gun,
Yep.
that 11% of that's going to wildlife.
Right.
But you can go to Patagonia and buy everything in the store, and
Right.
aside from whatever they donate out of
Right,
their corporate
right, sure.
funds,
Yep.
none of that money goes
Right.
to conservation.
Right.
And so I think sometimes what can be challenging for both the hunting and fishing community as well as the firearms community is being told that they are harming nature
Right.
when they're the ones who are contributing
Right.
all the funds. Now,
Right.
it's not
Right.
like they're opening their wallets and just
No.
handing those
Right.
funds out, but
Yeah.
they are
Yeah. But
contributing
they are
those funds.
contributing. Yep.
And then the people who are often saying that
Yep.
are not actually stakeholders in it in
Right.
the same way. So
Yep.
I appreciate you pointing
Yeah.
that piece out, because
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
I think that that's one of those things that could really bring the sides together.
Right. Yep.
If they
And
could
help them.
understand that
Yeah.
everybody's kind of in it together.
The state of Colorado did this marketing program, and I loved it. I just thought it was phenomenal. But it was called the Hug a Hunter, and it was targeted at the folks that bike and bird, and they talked about how we all love the wildness of Colorado. And the sale of these, so if you love these things, you participate in these activities, hug a hunter. And so it was sort of a spoof. So they would
I love
have
it.
like this, biker jump off his bike and hug this big burly hunter who's like, "What is going on
would
here?"
love
But it's
that.
a great message.
People
I
just
thought
stopping
it
in the woods
was,
are like, "Thank you for your service."
yeah. So for sure,
that's
it's really
really cool.
important to acknowledge that.
Most of our listeners, I guess this is kind of my last thing, most of our listeners are not in Maine. They're around the country
Okay.
or outside the country. And WildFed hits cable next month, and we, people hear us constantly talking about Maine.
Yeah.
So I just want to give you
Best
maybe
place to be.
Yeah, exactly. Vacation land, the way
Yeah.
life should be. So I just want to give you the floor to address people from out of state who keep hearing about Maine from us and are like, "Man, should I go visit Maine? Should I go hunt there?" We're hosting a couple this weekend who are coming from New York to hunt for their very first time with us. And so, we're always trying to encourage people to come visit. So what are you going to say to those folks?
Oh, I mean, I think there's unparalleled hunting in the state of Maine, and there's just so much opportunity. And we've got the coast, we have inland lakes, we've got 40,000 lakes and ponds across the state, incredible mountains. The state of Maine has it all. And on top of all that, we have huge wildlife populations. We have great, robust deer population. We have the largest bear population aside from Alaska. We've the largest bear population in North America. We've got ample turkeys. We've got great game species. We've got probably the world's best moose hunt in the state. Granted, it's not that easy to get a permit, but
people, that's why people should start
right?
putting in every year now.
Yes, I mean,
and
it's
draw
a
moose tag
world-class
eventually.
hunt.
Yeah.
So we have world-class opportunities. We've got tremendous fisheries resources. Our brook trout fishing is unparalleled. We have one of the largest
Most of the
native
states have
fish.
lost their brook trout.
Yep, we've got the largest native brook trout population. There's just incredible opportunities. And we didn't talk really much about fishing at all, and that's definitely not my forte. But you've got practically year-round opportunities to fish in the state of Maine, whether it's on hard water, or in the springs, in the streams and lakes and ponds. It's just endless opportunities to participate in outdoor activities in Maine, and it's year-round. So whatever you like, if you like it warm, hot, cold, ice, snow, it's amazing state to come visit. And I think people will find that the people in Maine are pretty welcoming. They're pretty friendly. They're pretty helpful. I think they're really warm, generous, sincere, just lovely, lovely group of people. So I would encourage everybody to come.
Thank you. Anything, Grant, that I'm leaving out here?
Not that I can think of.
It's been great to talk to you
been
today.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
you guys. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Any last things that you want to say?
No, I think I've said quite a bit.
Yeah. Anyway.
No, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thanks for being my commissioner.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.